Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
You did that on purpose. Excuse me, now I'm gonna cough.
Sorry about that.
Oh my, no, you're not. You are not sorry. Okay, wow. Listen,
Shawna, I am so sorry that you are fighting something. You are sick, and yet you're still with us. That's amazing.
I know. Okay, yeah, so excuse my appearance. I know I'm disheveled, but listen. Oh my gosh. Okay, first of all, I'm still a little bit feverish. Second of all, Dan said something, of course, funny, and then presses record as I'm laughing and responding. I'm trying to hold back a coughing fit. And you know, that's where we are. So happy Tuesday.
Yeah.
Well,
you make it look so easy, but now we're getting this inside glimpse at really how hard it is to do the job that you're doing.
It truly is. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Dan, it took 3 years, but COVID finally caught me. Like this is my first time in 3 years getting COVID. Nah, that sounds like I'm like, ooh, but I mean, like, I'm just like, it's been 3 years, right? And so literally Friday, I'm doing, all my last minute prepping and stuff for the Good Friday service, my end of things with welcome and communion and all of that.
Which is significant. It's a big load. I mean, you have a big load.
Yes. And I kind of had a sore throat when I woke up in the morning, but I just thought, sometimes you wake up, you have kind of a sore throat. Maybe you slept with your mouth open or something. I just thought, no biggie. I think I popped some Tylenol or something. And I was just going about my day. And then I don't know what it was. It was like in the afternoon, I was like, I don't think I feel good. I think I have fever.
Oh, no.
I immediately started texting pastors and folks were like, hey, this is what's going on. And then I tested because, my husband had COVID, but he had been like quarantined down in the basement. So I hadn't even really seen him. And I tested, and I think it didn't even take the full processing time, immediately came back
oh man,
flashing COVID. So I was out Good Friday, and I for the next 36 hours felt like I was going to die. I was out Easter Sunday, and all of that to say, Dan Kent, what did I miss? I feel like some stuff went on, and I didn't get to be a part of any of it.
Yeah,
so relying on you today because I don't know.
Yeah, and you were missed too because you did have a big role there in terms of coordinating everything, and so the rest of the staff without Shawna there,
my gosh,
it's like someone let the chickens out because we were all going all over the place, running into each other and knocking over tables, and it was pretty chaotic. But we got it done. And there's a couple of things I would say about that. We had a Good Friday service and then an Easter service, and so there's 2 services between the last MuseCast and this one, and it was great. The Good Friday service, of course, was more of a reverent, sort of kind of reflective kind of piece on the crucifixion, where we had different people reading from the scripture, and that was really fun. And then some really great music and just a short little message by Greg. And then we did communion together, which was really fun because all of the pastors had a post, had a table. And so we were kind of giving out communion, and it was really neat to meet. Every time we do stuff like this, I end up meeting people that I haven't met before, and people who, made a special trip here for Easter to be part of the Easter service. And it's really neat to know that, the work that we're doing is connecting with people. And sometimes it feels like we're just speaking into the void, but there's people out there, and really, really neat people that I got to meet. And I was very grateful for that. And then Saturday, we had the Easter service, and I have a sermon here to share, but that was really great also.
Did you have it on Sunday? Did you have Easter on Saturday?
What did I say?
You could have. You said Saturday.
Did I say Saturday?
I mean, it could have happened on Saturday. I was passed out, so I don't know. Maybe you guys just went all crazy.
No,
all kinds of
look at
things.
This is what I'm saying. You were like unconscious, and you're still correcting the details. It's uncanny. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. It's something.
Well, hey, listen. I thought about you though, because I think it was like yesterday the White House officially ended the COVID pandemic, and I was like, I was calling my congressman saying, "No, Shawna still has it. It's still going. It's still going." So.
Yep. It's not so fast, Biden. Not so fast.
That's right. Thanks, Biden.
So. Come on now. Really quickly before you get into your sermon, I just want to say, like, thank you, you, Dan, and the rest of the pastoral team and our staff. Like, we do have incredible people that we work with, and so when one of us drops like a dead leaf, others just roll right in, and things just plow along. So I'm so grateful. For that. So tell me about Easter Sunday. Give me your summary. I'm so excited. I mean, I did listen this morning, like on 1.5 speed, which uncannily sounds very familiar to me, like Greg speaking anyway. So it felt like, normal.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, I noticed the same thing. Yeah, that's good. Well, hey, so I always love it when Greg includes poetry. He did one like 2 years ago where he kind of based the illustration of his sermon on this the hawk the gyre, and that was really cool. And then this week he was using Robert Frost's poem "Nothing Gold Can Stay," and I have a story about that. But the idea of the poem, I'll read it to you. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay. Now, if you notice the words that I use there, they're a little different than what Greg shared on Sunday. Mm-hmm. He was wrong. I'm right.
Always. Dan is right, you guys. You heard it here.
Yeah, well, because I was going to share this later, but I'll say this now. And I also have a story about this poem. But when I was, single and hip now with it, wow, and young and full of vitality, I thought this was my strategy. I thought that I could really impress a young lady if I memorized a bunch of poetry. And so on my way to and from work, I had Robert Frost's book of poems open, and I would memorize poetry. So this is one of the poems I memorized because it's probably my favorite poem of all time. And yeah, so I memorized it. So when Greg read the poem, I'm like, no. Yes. So you'll notice different variations in that. So
all right. Really quickly, I will always stand by the hip now with it. Wow, Dan Kent against Greg Boyd any day of the week. So I got your back, man. I got your back.
I am not nearly as hip now with it wow as I used to be, but I love the Lord and I love the community I'm in, and so there.
Is that how you captured Barb? No. Inquiring minds want to know.
That's what's funny. That's what's so funny is when I started kind of dating Barbara, she could care less about the poetry that I memorized. All those hours I spent memorizing poetry, she's just like, why did you do that for?
Yeah.
And just didn't even,
She's a smart lady, man. Smart lady.
Very smart. So okay. So all right, so he starts off with this poem, which really kind of captures this sad fact that in this life, the good things tend to fade away, and we get these precious golden moments, and we want to hold on to them, and yet they dissipate. And life itself, it can be so good, and yet it goes away, and we long for this gold that doesn't go away, and we have this kind of feeling. And Plato kind of tapped into this as well, and so he talked about there's, even though like you see trees will come and go and animals will come and go and all that kind of stuff, there are some things in life that don't come and go. And that was very curious to him, because you'd think in a universe where everything is going, that there wouldn't be anything that doesn't go. And yet we have things like love and justice and beauty and things like that seem to always be the same. And so Greg kind of used these kind of very abstract ideas to kind of base his discussion on what is going on with the resurrection. And because if it's true that God exists, and that God became a person, and that we killed him, and then that God was resurrected, that would suggest that maybe these longings for this permanence, these longings that we have for a gold that doesn't fade, for a gold that doesn't go away, maybe those longings indicate something true and real, and there is this actual potential to be a part of some type of gold that doesn't fade. And so he says, well, is it true? Is it true that Jesus really did rise from the dead? And so he basically used this Easter sermon in our Unraveling Truth series. And you'll notice how we line that all up so perfectly so that we could do the resurrection stuff on Easter. And so he used this as an opportunity to just share 6 arguments for why he thinks that the resurrection is true. And even though logically you can't prove it with all certainty, psychologically you can believe it enough and you can justify it enough to commit yourself to it. And that's what Greg sought to do in the sermon. So the first argument is that we have these longings of the human heart that seem out of place in this world. We long for this permanence. We long for things like love, and we get glimpses into these things that go beyond this world, which suggests that maybe we were not made for this world. The second kind of argument that he talks about is just the sacred tradition of the resurrection story. And he looks at some of the creeds that the Apostle Paul quotes that probably go back to just within a couple of years of the death and resurrection of Jesus. And the reason why that's significant is because the only really plausible alternative explanation to the resurrection stories, other than it really happened, is this idea that it something good happened, but not a resurrection. And the resurrection is sort of this legend that developed. And what we know about legend development is that it takes many decades, if not centuries, for a legend to develop like that. And being that some of these creeds that the Apostle Paul quotes are just within a couple of years of the event, there's just not enough time for that. Which brings us to the third argument, which is the fact that there were these eyewitnesses that were still around that the Apostle Paul appeals to in some of his letters, and they were there during the event. And so that's particularly interesting because, again, that puts the Apostle Paul really close to the events, and there's all sorts of checks and balances to people who are lying about it or who might be fabricating things. There are people who say, no, I was there. That did not happen or whatever. And you have that there. In particular, you have Peter, who is referred to as Cephas, which is the Aramaic kind of version of his name, which puts the creed back when they were still using Aramaic, which sort of went away over the years, which means that creed must be really old. And also the creed appeals to James, who is the brother of Jesus. And Greg has this really nice piece about talking about how the last person who would fabricate or legendize a person would be the younger brother of that person, and I thought that's always a fun kind of argument that Greg makes. And then number 4 he talked about the women at the tomb, which really echoed nicely kind of your sermon on women in ministry and the centrality of women in the Jesus story, and in particular the most important part of the Jesus story, which is the resurrection story. And so that was the fourth argument. The fifth argument is that the message of the resurrection and the cross is so countercultural. There's nothing in the culture, in the Jewish culture, that would anticipate a resurrection like this. At best, the Jews had this idea that there might be this resurrection of everyone at some point, but this idea that one person would be resurrected seemed kind of surprising and not part of the momentum of thought in Judaism. But more than that, even the crucified Messiah not only was incoherent or inconsistent with the momentum of Jewish thought, but it sort of mocked some of the ideas of Jewish thought, which is that there would be this king that conquered, not this God who sacrificed himself. And so typically when you have a legendary development, the legend tends to affirm the momentum of thought within a culture. And this really overthrew the expectations and the momentum of thought that you find there. And then finally, Greg appeals to the transformation of the disciples. Not only James the brother, who we're told did not believe during the gospel, but after the resurrection, suddenly, after Jesus appeared to him, suddenly he was not only a believer, but one of the leaders of the movement. And you have people like Peter and James, and you have the Apostle Paul, and all of these people whose lives were radically transformed. And I don't think Greg mentioned this, but Peter always sticks out to me, because Peter, when you look at Peter's life, he's all talk. I mean, he's on the water and he's like, let me go out there too. I can do that. And he can for like 40 seconds. And then he starts losing it. And then, toward the end, when Jesus is about to be arrested, Peter's like, I'll stick with you. And Jesus is like, Peter, no, you won't. You're not as brave as you think you are. And sure enough, he denied Jesus 3 times. And yet, eventually, Peter did suffer and die for Christ, and he did actually follow through. And that's my favorite transformation story. But there's so many, and really all except for John, as far as we know, the other disciples were all martyred, and some of them in gruesome ways. Peter, his history suggests, might have been crucified upside down and buried upside down on a crucifix, which is horrifying. And it just, so they're all killed in very gruesome ways, and yet their conviction was that strong that they couldn't deny it, even in the face of that type of suffering. And so that is sort of his argument for believing that, he doesn't know with 100% logical certainty, but the idea that it's true is far more compelling than the idea that it's not true, or that it's a legend, or the disciples just made it up, or whatever. And I think it's a really good argument, and it's this collection of arguments and a couple others are basically what has compelled me to go all in on this as well. Mm-hmm. So what did you think of the Easter sermon?
Well, I am really sad that I missed it in person. And like I said, I've been kind of out of it. So I just really felt able to listen and like understand what I was hearing this morning. And I just want to say first of all, I love the way that the sermon was laid out. Like, if you want to talk about the logistics of the sermon and the way he brought us along, I loved all of that. I loved the 6 reasons that he gave, and then the content behind each reason. My favorite, though, were 2 of the things that you pointed out as well. One, just a testimony of James, right? Like, Jesus' own brother, who, while Christ was alive, was like, forget about it. Like, you are a bozo. Like, he didn't want anything to do with them. And then after Jesus' resurrection, just the warrior that he became for Jesus is just beautiful. I love the humanity to that to that account. I just think it's beautiful. And then this is where the disciples for me get redeemed, right? Because they were so cowardly. And I don't say that in a judgmental way, because Lord knows I very well could have been as well. I mean, let's be real about what they were facing if they stood alongside Jesus. Like, it wasn't like they were going to get sent in timeout. Like, it was literal life and death stuff here. So I get it. There's no shame, but like, they were pretty cowardly. And the way that they just, with new life, rose up and spread the word, and like you said, were martyred in some horrific ways, that is compelling to me. And I just can't believe that they would do that if it weren't true. Like, why? Right. Why would you subject yourself to that for a lie, when it would be so much easier to be like, you know what, you're just kidding. Right. Yeah. And I'm not using eloquent words. I'm just, Wow. So yeah, I appreciated the message, and I appreciated the remembrance, and just the celebration, and yeah, and for those reasons, all in. And I don't want to say any more than that, because then I'll get into the one nugget that I do have for today. But
I forgot about nuggets.
Yeah.
Good reminder.
You have to have an Easter nugget. Yes. So yeah, just really thankful for the celebration of a risen Savior. And really thankful for a community and a body that celebrated that so beautifully. And I hear that it was really packed in the building and in the overflow. And it's not about numbers, but that's just really cool to think of all these people coming together, and the amount of folks that were honest to say, I'm not 100% certain of this, but they're still engaged and still seeking. And I think that's really cool. So
it is. I agree with that. It's, I just saw somebody shared on social media about, how more and more people are leaving the church and all that kind of stuff. And maybe 20 years ago, those types of things would have worried me, but I feel like, what are you going to get that's better than God becoming human and rising from the dead to redeem humanity? I mean, what else is there? I mean, in fact, the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, and I love this, how Paul just says, this is the reality. Okay. This is what we're dealing with when we talk about the resurrection. This is what's at stake. And he says this in 1 Corinthians 1, chapter 15, and I'll start on verse 17. And he says, if Christ has not been raised, then your faith is futile. You are still in your sins. And everyone who has died are lost. If only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are to be pitied more than all others. And so he's basically saying, look, if this story isn't true, then everything is futile. Even no matter how religious you are, or you could be the leader of the biggest church in the world, you could be on Oprah talking about 7 steps to spiritual wholeness. But all of that stuff is just a dumb show if Christ has not risen from the dead. And it just, that's how important to the reality of this is. And I just love how kind of blatant and direct the Apostle Paul is about that. And so, wrestling with, do I really believe this? I think it is important. And and I'm so grateful that we have such compelling reasons to think that it's true.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of those, this is maybe the biggest part of our faith that can become stale, right? Like, we know every Easter you're going to hear some version of, he is alive, he is no longer here, he has risen. You're going to hear some version of that. And so it can become, kind of like, it can lose its spark, it can lose its wonder if you allow it to. And so I don't know, I just think it is so powerful that somehow, some way, again, as I'm listening this morning, because, I was dead to the world on Sunday, but as I'm listening, I just, became excited again about my faith and excited again about this Lord that we serve, and even more confident in who he was and who he is and what that means for us. And so, yeah, I just hope that people don't lose that. Like, don't let it just become, a day on the calendar every year. Like, that you're expecting the same message. Like, expect new and fresh, and relevant, because that's who he is. He is fresh and relevant. And I don't know. I'm rambling.
You know what I would say? He's hip now with it, and wow, that's what he is. Hey, I have a story too about nothing gold can stay. So so like and I think I shared this on here before, but I'm going to share it again because it was an important moment for me. But it was I had just graduated college, and to save money and I just loved learning so much, and I just loved college so much, and I just wanted to I wanted to get it done. I wanted to see, I challenged myself to see if I could complete my 4-year degree in 3 years. And so I just like packed it on, and I did so much learning in a short amount of time. It's amazing that my head didn't crack open, because it was just pretty intense. And so when I finally graduated, there was like a 2-week period where I was just in I was like a zombie. I was just in this daze, just exhaustion days. And it was, May, late May, early June. And so it was really nice. The weather was really nice, and people started to have garage sales. And so I grew up going to garage sales with my mom and my grandma. And so I decided I'd stop at this garage sale, and this lady's driveway, she had a bunch of tables along the little driveway, and I would just kind of mindlessly, looking at the stuff on there, and then there's like this little golden book, and it's like what was it, like a collection of Robert Frost poems, and I opened it up right in the middle, and I opened it right to Nothing Gold Can Stay, and I had never really read poetry, and I started reading it, and I just broke down crying right there in this lady's driveway. I couldn't stop crying at this poem. And so I bought it. It was like 10 cents. And it hit me so hard and so deep. And it resonated with this despair that I had deep inside. And so it was that, that then I bought his whole collection, and that's when I started memorizing it and started writing my own poetry. And now I have like 3, collections that I've written, but it all started with this poem in this lady's driveway in Arden Hills, Minnesota. And that's what started it all. So.
Oh my goodness. Was it Mary Van Sickle's driveway?
It was really close to Mary Van Sickle's house, but it was not. No.
I love that story, Dan. I don't think you've shared it on the MuseCast anyway. No, so, wow.
Yeah. You get to a certain age, you forget which stories you've told.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh, I love that. Beautiful, beautiful. That's a great way to transition to
nugget time.
Nugget time. You're gonna have to be verbose for me, because
this
is all I got. All right. Do you want to start the nugget or end the nugget?
I will start, but let me just ask you a question though. Mm-hmm. How has COVID been for you? This is your first time having it, right?
This is my first time. Yeah.
Have you felt like, wow, this is as bad as people said it was, or have you kind of just shrugged it off? A bit bad fever?
No. Okay. So here's the thing. I will say, first of all, I'm thankful, because trust me, I know there are people who ended up hospitalized and ended up not making it through, and who have like long COVID symptoms and all that. So I feel blessed. But I will say that first like 36 hours, I literally, like, the only way I can describe it is the back part of my body just felt super achy, like I'd been run over by a Mack truck, and the front part of my body felt like needles were being stuck into me. Like, really? It was the stress, and all I could do is just lay in bed and just and I think I slept for probably 20 hours. Like, I just felt like death warmed over. In fact, Janice, she texted to check up on me on Saturday, and she's like, "How are you?" And I was like, "I am deceased. Like, I am no longer with you guys."
Yeah, man.
Excuse me. So, but then yesterday, I kind of started to feel a little better. Like I sat in the backyard for a few minutes because the sun was shining, and I just thought I have to get outside and get out of my bedroom where I was quarantined. But yeah, just fatigue now and some congestion stuff, and like still feverish. Like, I thank God you can't really see because I'm like, woof.
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap up. Did you lose your taste?
Warm.
Did you lose your taste?
I don't think so, but I didn't have a ton of an appetite either. So I feel like I can still smell, but I'm congested. So I really don't know that to be true. I'm going to assume I can still smell. And I'm going to assume, well, no, because I had coffee and I could taste that. So I think I'm good.
Good.
I think I'm good. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're back. So that's good.
Thank you. On the mend. Yes.
Yes. Well, good. All right. So my nugget is, I'm going to shamelessly steal my nugget from something that you said.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, because we did maple syrup this year. And so we had about, I don't know, 35 to 40 gallons of sap that we turned into like a gallon and a half or so of syrup. And so, we would go, we have like a little stove in back that we made with these kind of pizza oven bricks on our patio, and we put wood and kindling and all that kind of stuff in there. But it was kind of cold this year, and it was kind of windy, and so we didn't sit out there, and there was ice all around there because we had so much snow that a lot of times when we get to this cooking part, we can just sit out there and have lemonades and beer or whatever, root beer and soda and all of that kind of beverage type stuff, and we would just sit and watch the sap boil. But because of the ice and the accumulated snow, there wasn't any place to sit, and so we would just have the fire going, and like every half hour or so, one of us would run out there and turn, kind of take the stick and bust up the ash and stuff and put some fresh wood in. And so it just kind of made me think of the importance of rekindling that fire, and that the point that you made earlier about just coming back to these arguments and letting the conviction of these arguments rekindle that fire. It's one thing to just be mentally kind of stimulated and say, oh, that's a very compelling argument. But the goal there isn't just to be mentally entertained. The goal is to provoke a fire that transforms your life. And so I love that we come back to these things frequently. And Easter is a great opportunity to restoke that fire and let that fire transform us. And that's the next kind of thing that we have to do, is we have to now let that fire transform us. And so that's my nugget, is to let the fire transform you.
I love it. Let the fire transform you. My nugget is short and sweet, and something that both Dan and I have already said today, and that Greg said on Sunday. And it is, I'm all in. And this is my encouragement as to why you should be all in. Because, okay, here goes my COVID brain. Come on, Shawna, focus. Okay. Because even if this is all just a fever dream, right? And like, none of this is really real and none of it matters. Like, I much prefer the person that I am following Jesus and striving to love like he loved and care like he cared, and just be who I feel he's calling me to be. I much prefer that version of me than any other. Yeah. And so what do I have to lose? Like, if this is all just a fever dream and it's just some legend that we've all bought into, it's not hurting me, and it's certainly not hurting those I come into contact with. So I'm all in. Now I have more evidence and more reasons for being all in, but at the end of the day, I'm good. I'm good. And like I said, I prefer the redeemed Shawna over whatever the heck else I would have been had it not been for Jesus. So all in.
Yeah. That nugget is so good. Let me just follow up on that really quick.
Okay.
I think that what you express, I agree with you 100%. And I've thought about that too, where it's like, I do like the Jesus following Dan, just as a person, better than any other version of me that I can think of. And I think that that's a really good way to put it. But I also think that that's why Jesus says in John 7 that if you want to know if I am who I say I am, keep the commands to live this out. And it's also why I think the New Testament emphasizes so much the importance of our personal testimonies, because it is how I have been transformed that is more convicting and more convincing, I think, than just about anything else. And so I think that's a great nugget.
Awesome. All right. You carried me through, Dan.
You did it.
Carried me through.
You did it. What a fighter. Goodness. What a fighter. Just battling.
Oh, yeah.
Remember in Rocky when he's like bloody in the corner and his coach is like, Rocky, you got to stop. You can't do anymore. You can't handle it. And Rocky says, let me at him. I can do it. And he gets up and everybody's thinking, you're crazy, Rocky. You're crazy. Don't do it. And he does it anyway. And that's Shawna. That's Shawna. That's right.
Oh my goodness, you're hilarious. Well, guys, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for being around. Thanks for being a part. We super appreciate it. And we're going to continue. Oh, good. Unraveling truth. We're going to continue unraveling truth this Sunday. So don't miss it. And then circle back. Dan and I will be here next Tuesday on the MuseCast to continue the conversation. Have a wonderful week, guys.